All right, welcome to the Black Flag podcast. I'm your host today, Brett Lindenfelser, and here we got Sam.
Hey, and Daniel, and
Right, and we have a very special guest today. His name is Tom Luongo. How are you doing today?
I am good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and we can go from here.
All right. Well, I am. My name's Tom Luongo. I run Gold Goats and Guns, which is both a blog, a podcast, and a Patreon service. You can find the blog over tomluongo.me. You can find me on Twitter, uh, pissing off pretty much the entire world at TFL 1728. And then the Patreon service is for the golden the investment newsletter slash biweekly market reports, private content, private blog, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, and I also work for Newsmax, by the way, on the side. I also moonlight as a conservative for Newsmax, so that's also fun. There you go.
All right. Well, originally when we had booked you, I had kind of planned out maybe we would start out with maybe a quick overview of your thesis of how the Fed is at odds with Davos and the um, Great Reset agenda, but we got some bombshell news on Friday during trading hours, and that kind of persisted
Right.
all weekend long. And now it's like today, like this morning, it's just been on fire. So I think we just start from there, and we could probably work ourselves to that point afterwards. So like, what is going on right now with
Well,
Silicon
it's
Valley
all
Bank?
it's all part of it, right? So, yeah, it's all part of it because I mean the way I'm going to interpret what's going on with Silicon Valley Bank and the way the markets are reacting to all of this morning is all fully in line with what I think about what's going on. And I'm going to preface that by saying also that look, all of this stuff is in flux. I was just chatting with one of my patrons, and I said, "Look, I'm going to remain skeptical of everything that I even think at this point,
right.
because we are all working within inherently incomplete information. We can see the signposts, we can interpret them and read the tea leaves and assess the people and all the rest of that all you want. But the truth of the matter is that that's also going to be subject to constant revision because look, everybody's under pressure, right? And how they respond to that pressure can look self-contradictory. And so then we can all like dig in our feet and put on our our ideological, Wellington boots and stick in the mud and go, I'm right and you're wrong and fight me, bro. But the reality is that it's going to be much more flexible than that because we're now dealing with people trying to manage chaos. We're trying to watch people, I think, go through a controlled demolition of the old way of doing things, and they don't have perfect information about what's out there, right? The Fed has no more perfect information about what's going on than I do or anybody else does. And so when so if I say, which I think, that the Fed and the New York boys blew up Silvergate and Silicon Valley Bank last week on purpose, the same way they blew up FTX on election night on purpose because it's in their best interest to do so. Why? Their primary competitors are the offshore dollar markets, including the crypto markets, because they're just freaking euro dollars as well. Okay. That's all stable coins are. And worse than that, they're the most egregiously leveraged synthetic dollars, offshore dollars. Okay. As opposed to the ones within the US banking system or even the ones, floating around the economy. Certainly there's no synthetic dollars floating around the economy unless people are paying for, their Starbucks with USD coin. The last I checked, I don't think very many people are doing that, but maybe they are. My point being is that maybe if Starbucks is willing to take USD coin, I'm like, whoa, cool. But simply because I'm going to trade nothing and get something, not because I think USD coin is worth a shit. I don't. But if that's the fundamental thesis, look, these people are all, the whole Davos or argument is that in order for the financial system to in its current form, in any way, manner, shape, or form, in the current society in its current form, or any evolution of society in its current form, has to go through a collapse and rebuild, and we should digitize money completely in the process and leave them in charge, because that's what central bank digital currencies at the retail level will do. We can do away with the central banks, or not the central banks, the commercial banks, because they're evil, right? That sells to the Occupy Wall Street crowd. It also it also somewhat sells to the libertarian and the Fed crowd, because we've been we've been successful in highlighting the evils of central banking. So none of us ever want to knee-jerk defend the Fed, even when the Fed does the right thing, which is in this case is go after the communists in Europe and in the United States. And there's just as many there's many of them in the United States, and they occupy positions of power. And
So you,
and that, in the interim, you look at the Fed, they look at the central bank, you look at the Fed, and you look at the commercial banks, you just say, look, they're the guys caught in the middle between the people and the commies. And they're the only ones with enough power to stop the commies from doing what's going to be done. I'm really like dumbing this down. Okay. Really dumbing it down because it just needs to be like discussed. And it has to be discussed in those kind of ideological terms, because this is about the private formation of capital versus the public formation of capital. And commies don't believe in private formation of capital. So they will do everything imaginable to destroy the reputation and the ability of the private sector to coordinate capital through time. They want that power, and they will do anything imaginable to get it, including blowing up food plants and restricting our ability to drill for oil, and oh, by the way, destroy our banking system and our legal system and our political system and our elections and everything else. So that's when you think of it this way, and you look at how they fund all this stuff. It gets funded through the egregious leverage afforded the world when the central bank of the world, the Federal Reserve, fuck the IMF, fuck the BIS. These people are not half as powerful as they think they are. They are only as powerful as the Fed allows them to be, because because the Fed is the source of dollars. So if the Fed says, you know what, I'm off this globalist gravy train, we're going away from the zero bound. When the zero bound is when we're at zero cost money, when money has no cost, shitty ideas dominate.
Absolutely.
And they're allowed to proliferate like mushrooms after a rainstorm in a cow field. And then we get Silicon Valley Bank is the 16th largest bank in the world. In the United States, what are you, out of your minds? So
who do you think where we are? So there's like a battle between the Feds and these commercial banks. Like, who do you think is going to win? Is it just automatically the Fed, or?
It's not automatically the Fed, but they have so many more. The problem is that so much of our analysis is based on the fact that we had Greenspan creating the Greenspan put, Bernanke and Yellen selling the country out for 15 years with ZIRP and effectively NIRP, right? Zero interest rate policy or negative interest rate policy, which basically subsidized the entire building out of the political superstate that is today the EU. Without 15 years of this stuff, okay, there's no freaking way the EU gets to where it is today. The ECB doesn't have nearly the balance sheet that it has today to throw around and do all of this stuff. It doesn't have any of this power. If the Fed had stayed at 5 or 6%, between 4 and 6% on the Fed funds rate, forget it. The euro would have collapsed years ago. Okay, but the Fed enabled all of this, and it also enabled the Chinese to run a mercantilist scam on the rest of the world for 20 years longer than it was supposed to, which filtered into Davos's plans, because they expected the Chinese to be their manufacturing source while still being the help for Europe, but still having control over their banking system. By forcibly opening up the Chinese capital account, forcibly opening them up and putting all the money into China, and then thinking that was going to give them political power, which is how they always do it.
Yep. See, Europe gave China communism in the first place anyway. It's where I get so annoyed with the MAGA crowd who are kind of buying into that anti-China narrative. I'm like, no, it is Europe that is our main enemy right now. And
the Chinese Communist Party, like there are doctrinaire communists in the Chinese Communist Party. Like, don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, they don't run. The people who are the architects of monetary policy in China, as Martin Armstrong has pointed out many, many, many times, these guys are all bond pit veterans. They were all educated and then sent over here to trade bonds. There ain't a person. 95% of the people at the Federal Reserve all have PhDs from Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. They're ivory tower eggheads. Okay, Danielle DiMartino Booth goes over this in grave detail in her book, and I absolutely recommend everybody listen to it. I would have listened to it as opposed to reading it, because then you get to listen to Danielle read her own work, which is hilarious.
Yeah, and I actually just did about a month ago, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I listened. I went down to have to watch a hockey game down in Tampa with a patron, and I put that on for the trip, and it was I listened to the first half of it. At that point, I had most of Danielle's story at that point, which was fine. Again, once we got into Richard Fisher, I'm like, okay, I've got it now. So it was great. I mean, it's a great book, and absolutely recommend everybody read it. It's a little out of date because it's talking about the Bernanke-Yellen Fed as opposed
Yeah.
to now the Powell Fed, which is when I had her on I had her on my podcast a couple of weeks ago. That was what I wanted to discuss with her, was like, what do you see as different about the culture of the Fed from when you were there versus what you're seeing today? And I'm, you know, I was able to tease some things out of her, and I think everybody should listen to that as well, just to get an idea of what the culture and the leadership at the Federal Reserve is like. And there's an internal war at the Fed. Like, the culture at the Fed's still very similar to what it always was, but Powell's leadership is fundamentally different. Okay, he's a different guy.
Yeah. So I wasn't as politically aware when Trump got elected at first. In fact, I was so disgusted with the choices we had in 2016, I didn't even vote.
Fair enough.
And what really started like waking me up, I was like, well, why is the media so adamantly against him? Right. And it took me years to figure this out. And I start to think that maybe it's because he appointed Powell as Fed chair. That was one of the primary reasons.
Brett, ask your question. How old are you?
I am 33.
Okay, so that's cool, dude. I didn't even have my political awakening until I was 33.
Okay.
So don't feel bad. Okay. And
Well, I mean,
you're way ahead. You're way ahead of my curve, and look at where I am today.
I mean, I
had to see where you are in 20 years.
I had some minor political awakenings in 2008 because that's the year I graduated, and yeah,
Sure.
what a great year to enter adult life.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And you are, and that is actually very, very much plays into my entire opinion about how your generation perceives the world at this point. And part of what I've been trying to do, even though I rag on millennials all the time, it is also to try and educate you to say, look, it's the black pill. The real black pill is that you're still being fucked. And it's still the same people who fucked you in 2008 and you fucked your parents in 1999, 2000. They're still fucking you today. And the counter narrative was they tried to tell you that you were getting fucked by Trump. I got news for you. That is not the case. In 2016, you described, why vote like that? That was me in 2012. Like, what's the point? I still voted for Ron Paul. I still wrote his name in, and I was still there, and I still wrote him in the 2008. But I knew damn well that McCain and Romney were, they were just globalists, right?
Right.
I knew it was done. I knew it was, especially as a hardcore old, as a kind of an OG libertarian at that point. I'm like, oh, yeah, this is dumb. But it was only during the early part of the campaign in 2016 when I realized what both Bernie Sanders and Trump represented, which was a populist uprising against the oligarchy. So at that point, I was absolutely voting. As a matter of fact, if Trump had lost the primaries and Bernie Sanders had won the primaries, I would have held my nose, thrown up a little bit in my mouth, and voted for freaking Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Not because I believe in Bernie Sanders, right? I'm dead serious. This is now just pure Rothbardian tactical voting. Right. Strategic voting.
Yep.
Nothing more, nothing less, right? So, but I was actually much happier to vote for Trump because I knew flat out, at the very least, they were going to lose their minds to such a degree that it was going to be hilarious at a minimum and potentially transformative if he doesn't suck. So Trump only kind of half sucked, and it was hilarious and pathetic.
Oh yeah.
And all of those things all at the same time. So it was a mess. It was a mess. By the time it was done, I'm like, okay, I'm over Trump. But look at what the things that they had to do in order to get rid of him, and look at the things that they're still doing to keep him coming back.
Right?
Why? Because Trump has had a peek behind the curtain, understands how the system works now, and despite some of his shortcomings as a human being, would be a very interesting Trump second term.
Yes. Okay. 100%. And there's a few things I'm still trying to map out because him and Elon Musk are the two guys that are the hardest for me to kind of pin down because Trump's still shilling vaccines.
Yeah. Trump doesn't like to admit that he's wrong. This is Trump's biggest problem. Yeah, Trump is a classic narcissist who never admits that he's wrong.
It also really helped him, in the campaigning and everything. If you never admit you're wrong, then I don't know. It's a good political move.
I mean, that's just the way these look. I can tell you, one of the things I first learned when I went to work at Newsmax was that the copy all had to be, I'm doing this. I'm leading you. I am in charge of this. Even if I'm wrong, I'm going to own up that I'm wrong and I'm going to move on. And I will never equivocate. I won't tell you, well, if you do this, this is a good way. I won't. We're not allowed to actually talk like normal people and go, oh, by the way, the stock is overvalued at this and undervalued at this. So this is how you should spread trade the your position like a normal person. No, like, and it's just it's the same thing in politics. You never show weakness. And I told my editors at I actually ran into serious problems with my first editor at Newsmax because of this, because I was writing a different kind of newsletter. And when I started doing that, my retention rates went through the roof, because everybody at that point realized that the people that I had understood that I was telling them the unvarnished version of the truth that I can see at this moment in time. I may be wrong about things, but at the very least, I'm not putting on a front. Okay. I'm not being Eric Sprott, constantly going out there and saying silver is the buy of the century for 25 years. Mm-hmm. Like, dude, sorry. I mean, I love Eric Sprott. I think he's right in some ways, but when? When is that going to happen, Eric? And for what reason? He's been wrong about all the reasons why. But and so I don't listen to any of those guys anymore. I don't, I know their hearts are on the right place, but I also know that, they're shilling at a certain level. And I'm not shilling here. I'm doing my best. And everybody says they're not shilling, but I'm telling you, I'll sit here and remain as flexible as possible and going, if the Fed bails out like Davos and bails out the ECB, I'll be like, oh shit, I'm done. I'm going to have to go get another job.
Right.
Like, because my whole business will collapse at this point.
Yeah.
I'll be back to 800 patrons and, looking for, brother, can you spare a dime? I need a cup of coffee.
So you don't think the Fed is going to bail them out?
No, not the ECB. As a matter of fact, everything that's happened so far this morning tells me that what has happened here is the following, in very, very broad strokes. And I'm not going to go into the details of it because it will take an hour. And I've done my homework this morning before we went live. What I think is the following. And everybody's going to go, oh, but this is the backdoor QE and this is backdoor. Yeah, everybody today believes that everything that happens is backdoor QE.
I've seen a lot of bad takes on Twitter this morning too. So
yeah, I've seen a lot of bad takes. So here's my take. Ready? The Fed took down Silvergate and SIVB because they wanted to. It's like FTX 2.0. If we're going to get rid of the synthetic dollar pump and the money laundering opportunity for it to recycle printed dollars in DC and favors in DC, they go offshore and then they come back to fund Google and Amazon and all this, Tumblerina von Safe Space and her CS job over at Twitter tormenting Republicans, right? And all of these bad startups with no freaking revenue and everything else. And there's many ways to interpret all of these startups. Some of them are literally just political payola. Okay, they aren't real companies any more than Simon & Schuster really paid Hillary Clinton a $5 million signing bonus for her book or Michelle Obama's book. These are all payoffs in the form of a book advance, some venture capital for a stupid fucking company or anything like that. So there's all of that out there. Okay. And some of those things were, pieces and, bricks in the wall of the building panopticon through central bank digital currencies, either being using Ripple or whatever it is that they want. And there's 100 different ways that they can get this done. But the ultimate thing here is that if you can create critical mass within the crypto markets, that in terms of and I'm speaking specifically about your generation, in terms of your faith in it over the old system backed by the Fed and the commercial banks, then that's the ultimate tail wagging the monetary policy dog. Okay. The old Eurodollar system under LIBOR was the way they did it for years. LIBOR is ending in June. SOFR is now the law of the land. The Fed controls the SOFR rate, and so the U.S. domestic demand for dollars controls the SOFR rate, which then translates out to the demand for U.S. dollars in overseas markets. I mean, the Fed is not going to go through all of this fight to put SOFR into place, to do away with LIBOR, to ruin the City of London's ability to tell the United States what the fucking value of their own goddamn currency should be, to back up the ECB, the BOE, the British pound, the euro, and all this other fucking globalist communist claptrap bullshit. And say, no, we are Americans. We are the central bank of the United States. I am the FOMC chair, and I have a dual mandate, Christine Lagarde. I don't give a fuck whether your neck scarf turns red and you start to get the freaking vapors leatherneck. I have two goddamn mandates: full employment and stable prices. Now, I can't deliver on those because they're mutually exclusive. Oh, by the way, if you're a strict Austrian on this, Austro-libertarian on this, but that doesn't matter. That rhetoric alone is what you need to hear. Okay. And when I brought this up to Boots, she said, oh, by the way, who complained the most about the first 75 basis point rate hike? Christine Lagarde. You can't deploy interest rates of unusual size. What are you doing? You will destroy us. Well, guess what? If you look at the cross-currency markets this morning, if you look at the deal that was put in place between the Davos-controlled Fed run by Janet Yellen, Treasury Department run by Janet Yellen, and the Jerome Powell-led Fed, what you see this morning is a quid pro quo. A quid pro quo. We're going to raise FDIC limits to bail out all the depositors. That means that Nancy Pelosi's $5 million cash account over at SIVB, she's going to get paid her $5 million. And all of the DC donor class that put all their money in there. And some of the VC founders that were getting paid off by Soros to, build some stupid friggin' software project that could be used to, build the Panopticon. All that stuff, those people are going to get bailed out. That's the price that the Fed is going to have to pay to get rid of the bank, which is the conduit for this to continue. So we're going to cut off the flow of the money to these things, just like they cut off the flow to the money with FTX. So they're just continuing to cut off pipes into crypto, into dodgy crypto bullshit, and the levering up and the recycling of profligate spending on Capitol Hill, which goes out through the military industrial complex, through foreign aid, through this, through that, and comes right, and then gets levered up, handed to people like George Soros and others, levered up, and then sent right back here to pay off, to pay off to pay off certain people, to create, to create companies like CrowdStrike, for example, to use that money to undermine the institutional confidence of the United States. The dollar was literally being used by these people to destroy the legal structure, the cultural structure, the political structure, the electoral structure, and the financial structure of the United States.
It's been done for decades too.
It has been, but this is the latest iteration of it. And the crypto world was just the latest iteration of it. And this is to say crypto, not Bitcoin.
Yes, because I think
Bitcoin is different.
Crypto
is different, and as are all other hardcore proof of work coins like Monero and all the rest of them. Like whether you like those or not, it's irrelevant. They are the core of what crypto should be.
Yep, that's the way you set them up.
Yep. And so you got to get rid of the USD coins. You got to get rid of FTT. You got to get rid of all this stuff. You got to get rid of every bit of it. And you're going to get rid of Aave. It's going to go away. You're going to get rid of all of it. It's all going to go away. Every bit of it. What's going to be left is stuff that is real. Yeah. There will be some smart contract platform that will survive but they will survive as an adjunct because it's better to do those on a dedicated software project to that kind of thing as opposed to bolting it on the Bitcoin. This is my prediction for the next 5 years in the crypto space.
Okay.
But because Bitcoin is a bearer asset, it actually has the ability, like gold, to help recapitalize the entire U.S. financial system. And which is a much farther evolution of the thesis. And it's one I was literally arguing with Caitlin Long about this morning on Twitter DM and not arguing, but it was a good frank discussion about our views on this. And I happen to agree with some of and Caitlin brought up some really good points, which I have to consider yet, about like why did they go after her bank when she was actually trying to introduce Bitcoin in a custodial fashion into the banking system. And my best answer to her privately was the timing's not right. They can't afford to have that now. They can't afford to allow that into the marketplace because I think there's still regulatory and government pitfalls. While the Biden administration is in place,
yep.
And while the stupidity reigns supreme on Capitol Hill, like there's a whole lot that can be done here that is wrong. I think post 2024, depending on who gets elected, what happens, I think that environment for Bitcoin and for banks like Caitlin's are possible. I think I hate to use this metaphor here because I think she and people like her in the Bitcoin space reach for the boob too early on prom night.
Yeah. So So
But I may be
like
wrong
that
about that.
metaphor.
This is just that's purely me.
Yep.
It's purely opinion here, guys.
Oh, of course. And I actually thinking along these lines, like coming the election in 2024, they're wiping out all these ways that they use to fund, let's call it their election strategies.
Yeah.
The election of 2024 could look very, very different than what we just saw, last year.
It could. It very well could. And I think we have to watch this stuff carefully. So getting back to the deal. So like I said, that deal, if you really look at it, between Yellen and Powell, is very much a bullish sentiment for the 2024 election cycle. Because we got the bank, you got some cash, but you have no more ability to do anything with that cash because we know who you are, and you can go buy your own private island, or you can go retire, or you can go, that's fine, but you're done. Your ability to take that and like use it against us is over. And if you think you're going to use it against us again, you're done. And because Jamie Dimon is sitting there like the cat that ate the canary, just waiting there to go, okay, we'll just take your so whatever bank you try to move that money into next, we'll take that one over too.
So if that happens, like, who do you think? It's not like Republican versus Democrat, or is it? Is it? No. Okay. So who do you think they're priming to the Fed side? Who they're priming to?
Oh, for the election cycle?
Election,
God,
yeah.
I know that Soros and company are backing Ron DeSantis to the hilt. And I love Ron, but Ron is all wet on foreign policy, and I need him to stay here in Florida and shore up what he's done here. Wall Street's also, I think, telling DeSantis you don't have a shot. They're not going to put their money behind DeSantis. They want him to stay in Florida and finish what's being done, which is to move New York out of Wall Street and move it to Miami. And that's in process. And guess what else is centered in Miami as well? Bitcoin.
Yep.
Cool.
Miami is going to be the first
right wing and quote unquote right wing dissident media. It's all in South Florida, along with the internet bandwidth, thanks to the porn industry. Don't laugh. It's true.
Yeah,
I believe it. Yeah, I believe it.
Internet backbone, for Christ's sake. It's a
porn drives technology. They did it with VHS.
That backbone, like, you ask the question, like, why did they allow for porn?
Well, California screwed the pooch on that. I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, they could have had that business, but they chose not to. And as a matter of fact, one of my oldest friends went to, back in 2005, went to work for an early version of Pornhub, working out of a guy's apartment in freaking Boca Raton. Like I helped move him out of there when the job blew up and moved him back to Gainesville. Like, it was hilarious. Like, I mean, this shit's been going on for years. If we have a concentration of anything in Florida, we have a concentration of two very important things: pornography shitbags and Bitcoin shitbags. Like, it's like they're everywhere. All right, and it's fine. It is what it is, and but it's what's coming. Okay, and you can see the money that's flowing in to the state of Florida. It's off the charts. It's just off the charts. You have no idea.
Yeah, Florida and
so
Texas.
Texas is also, but Florida is a special thing.
Yep.
Do you think the Fed sort of cutting off these pipelines and whatnot, do you think that's going to be better for average Joes in the future?
Oh yeah, but it's going to be painful in the short term.
Okay.
And a lot of these people are going to have to be paid off to leave the stage. There's going to be deals cut, guys.
Yeah. I'm past the point of like I don't care about justice. I just want these people away.
Yeah. No, exactly. Like, can't you take the win? Like, oh no, I want them to win. Like, no, I'm like, justice. It's never going to happen. They're never going to apologize. Right? They're going to go like the thing that made me the happiest out of all of this was hearing that maybe Harry and Meghan Markle were going to lose. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were going to lose like $50 million or $100 million, and the FTC.
Heartwarming.
I know it was. My ass bled for them. It really was. It was terrible. I just felt like, look, Queen Narcissist herself. Queen Narcissist in waiting is going to have to cut back on her handbag.
So, what does this mean for the Ukraine conflict? Is this tied into that at all?
It is. It's absolutely tied into it because this funding for Ukraine. Look, Ukraine was a money laundering operation first,
right,
and foremost. And look, the Fed is executing certain things and excising certain aspects of the Davos Great Reset plan bit by bit by cutting out the financial system. On the other side, And one of my patrons, we were just chatting about it, and he said, it's funny, like the ECB is going to try to wriggle out of this stuff, and as much as they can, the offshore dollar markets are going to try and wriggle out of this, but they're going to be, but they're going to run out of bullets eventually. Soros and company will run out of bullets while the Fed can print their own. Well, doesn't that sound exactly similar to what's happening in Ukraine? The Russians can fight industrial war, and the Ukrainians have no infrastructure or capacity left.
Mm-hmm.
They have no political infrastructure. They've got no real physical infrastructure. They have to rely on the kindness of strangers to send them bullets and bombs. And they're running out of physical, capital. There's any freaking men left of fighting age or training to fight the war. So this whole thing is going to collapse very, very quickly. And then it ties into like 1-6 and Tucker Carlson and Elon Musk taking over Twitter. It's all the same thing. I call it the counter-revolution. And it's happening on multiple fronts. And Putin is no idiot. Neither is Raisi and in Iran, along with the head mullah, the head of the mullahs. It's the Ayatollah Sistani, not Sistani. I can't. The lead Ayatollah. I'm sorry, his name for escapes me. Same thing with Xi. Same thing with even Assad and all the rest of them. They have all. You know what? I learned a long time ago that in order to win a fight, it's not the number of punches you can throw that matter. It's the number of punches you can take.
Yep.
And
I mean, this is like
Iran has been executing that strategy against the Israelis brilliantly for 40 years now. And the Russians have been doing it with the Americans and Europe since the early 2000s with Putin. Around 2005 was when it really started to go. And then then after the Munich Security Conference speech of 2007, when he laid down the freaking law about what was going to happen next, it's been nothing but 15 years he's been fighting them on this front, understanding that you don't respond, like a jackass when it's just literally some guy sitting there saying, I'm poking you. I'm poking you. I'm poking you. And you're like, that's nice. Go fucking.
So is this then the is this the resegregation of the global world? Breaking it. I've heard like different people talking about more localized rather than globalized, where you're going to be trading with your next door neighbors rather than across the globe, trying to do more localized support of the infrastructure, economy, and everything.
I think that, like, for 10 years ago, I was working with a guy over in Vietnam, and we just sat there looking at this going, like, production of basic goods is going to, and with 3D printing and automated production, like, why are we shipping the cotton all the way overseas to have some Vietnamese girl making 30 cents an hour make me a $4 t-shirt? Why don't we stop spending the $3.50 on all of that and just, and when transportation costs are high enough, the economies of scale will be, we'll just keep the cotton in Atlanta, and we don't even have to have a human worker build the shirt for us. We can even, send them a picture of us and like get a tailored shirt for $5 as opposed to an untailored shirt, that we buy at Walmart for $4.50, and that's only after it's on sale. If they charge us $7 for it, right?
So why are we shipping?
I absolutely 10 years ago I thought this was coming, so I absolutely think this is coming now, and I think it's one of the things. It's one of the unintended consequences of Davos's desire to make energy uninvestable by raising a volatility. Okay, I'm not a MAGA guy anymore. I'm a Moya guy. Make oil investable again. Okay, and because the volatility in oil is a tell, because it shouldn't be that way. There's absolutely no reason why oil should be, 6.5%, internal volatility or weekly volatility from low to high relative to its price every week. But it is. I mean, oil is 50% more volatile on a week-to-week basis than silver is.
Wow.
Which is insane when you think about it. And silver's a thin market that nobody really cares about. I mean, like,
and silver's like famously manipulated too.
And famously, manipulated and everything else. And that's how manipulated oil is. Oil should not be this way. Everybody, the whole world would benefit, except for Davos, if the oil price was stable and predictable. But it's not. So policy changes about that. So yes, the world is deglobalizing from that perspective. Certain aspects of it will, without a doubt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's always going to be global trade, but I do think there's going to be a lot more localization, especially as we advance further into an era where the United States dollar isn't a global reserve currency. And you've mentioned that it'll just become more of like a regional reserve currency, not.
I think look, Powell said there's more than room in the world for more than one reserve currency. There's, I'm not averse to Bitcoin, but I am averse to stable coins. Like, take the man at his word, dude. Then go watch his actions. When he says things like that in front of the Senate, right, during Humphrey Hawkins' testimony, you have to listen to that carefully. That goes in the official record for everyone to hear. That is not just the Fed trying to shape or draw on markets. That is not part of the quote unquote communications policy. That is the opinions of the FOMC chair. And the FOMC chair sets freaking policy. So, when you put it in those terms, it's pretty obvious, right? So, yeah, I think all of this is happening. They don't for a minute believe that that Powell's going to pivot. I mean, if he has to for 6 weeks or whatever, not raise interest rates, will that really change anybody's calculus about what it is that he's done?
Right.
Like, if a couple of other, attendant things pop off and it takes a couple of weeks longer to, roll all this stuff down and get past the panic we're dealing with this morning, then so be it. It doesn't change anything. He still moved interest rates from 0% to 4.75% in order to do exactly what he's done.
Mm-hmm.
If it takes him another, 6 or 8 weeks to get that finished,
Yeah.
Do you think the housing market's going to crash or more than it has, I suppose?
Regionally.
Sure. Regionally?
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's a lot of people. Look, there's a lot of money out there. Like, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So a lot of these asset values, there's going to be a roll down of the asset values, right? The Fed is rolling up smaller Ponzi schemes, smaller Ponzi scheme banks. In this case, a soon to be smaller Ponzi scheme central banks are going to roll over and be fucked. Oh, by the way, go over to what's the word I'm looking for? Go over to Australia. There's notations this morning about at least 2 Australian banks starting to go under. There's going to be European banks that go under, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of cope going out there this morning about how the European banks are properly capitalized. Nothing is ever, officially denied until it's been confirmed, right? So, oh, by the way, they're having like all the analysts in Europe are saying, oh, the European banking system's great. Well, that's great. Then why is ING down 5%? Why is Unicredit down 10%? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Why are these things happening?
Yeah, strong Jim Cramer vibes.
Yeah,
exactly. So,
why puts on them.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess there's the Tom put, short everything. Except the dollar, gold, oil, and Dow. Like everything else is like whatever. Because why would you be along anything else at this point? Maybe Bitcoin. And they use the profits off the shorts to buy Bitcoin and gold coins.
Yep.
So they what was I saying? We were talking about, I got lost in all of that. Oh shit.
Where were we, Brett?
What's that? Where were we?
Crap, I forgot. You got a pretty good rant there.
You
know how that happens.
Use the profits
yeah.
of the shorts to buy
Stop me
Bitcoin.
before I sub-reference again, and then I go up. And
right.
So
anyway, the way I've been kind of looking at
hold on. I think it's it's about Europe and what's popping off, and and look, the Fed has to do what it's doing because of the de-dollarization that's happening around the world. I think this is an ancillary point to everything we're talking about, and maybe get us back onto the train. So there's no argument that here they have to. The Fed could easily delay a couple of rate hikes. This is where we were. Delay a couple of rate hikes if they need to, but they've clearly done what they've needed to do to get us to this point. The big question now is going to be the Congress's fiscal response. And it's very clear that part of this deal that was set up between Yellen and Powell was that Yellen gets to spend a lot of money she doesn't have, which means that the Fed is going to have to potentially monetize new debt, right? Well, yes and no, because the banks are going to get hit with higher fees is the way they're going to pay for it, and higher recapitalization fees. But here's what the Fed did with the rest of the deal. And this is the interesting part. And this is going to be the biggest cries of backdoor QE. I've already fielded 3 of these this morning.
I've seen lots
Ready?
of tweets about, it's backdoor QE.
Ready? This is here it is. So this whole idea is that a lot of banks have a whole bunch of treasuries that they have exposure to treasuries, right? That were trading at 1.5%, 2.5%, and then they were trading at 4%, and they're down. So the Fed is saying, look, you can take those you can ignore the mark to model value of that stuff, trade them in with the Fed at par. So whatever you paid for them, you'll be able to trade them with us at par to get short-term liquidity, to get a loan. What's the incentive here? They're going to turn them in at par, buy new bonds at 4.5%, right? 4.5% coupons, and basically end the hole and fill the holes in their balance sheets, because they just got a big capital injection, right? But here's the thing. It's not just the American commercial banks that are underwater on this. That are going to do this. You know who else is going to do this? Every U.S. corporation that has U.S. treasuries that they're sitting on mark-to-market losses on, and or their offshore banks, and that they're going to be able to bring U.S. treasuries back home at par, and anything that's bound up in, say, an interest rate derivative swap or carry trade or anything along those lines. The Fed just guaranteed, and it is QE, it is a put, but it's a put to bring the capital home and shore up the long legs, or the long or the short legs, the U.S. Treasury leg of any offshore derivative, leaving the other guy on the end to hang when the markets move against them. Oops. And all you're doing is creating even more fertile ground for offshore interest rate blow-ups and the even bigger holes in the European banking sheets, European and offshore bank balance sheets.
Man, I got a cousin.
I'm like, okay. I'm like,
I got a cousin who's in the Air Force.
I'm not like doing the Dr. Evil thing here. You don't say. Oh, okay.
I got a cousin in the Air Force, and currently he's stationed in Belgium, and he's been kind of bummed out now. He's going to have to be re-stationed back to like Fairbanks, Alaska. And I'm like, no, this is probably a good time for you to be moving the hell out of Europe. Like, you'll see it, a year down the road.
Fairbanks, really?
Well, I know it's. I think so. Ever since I started listening to you, I've never paid attention to European politics more, because I think that's where the really interesting things are starting to happen. Well, apart from like what's going on this week,
right?
We're starting to see a lot of resistance to the Davos agenda in countries, Europe, and especially the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Belgium. I mean, I saw big riots in Belgium. I saw big demonstrations in Italy and others. And Giorgia Meloni isn't. I don't know what to make of Giorgia Meloni in Italy.
Yes, that's another thing I wanted to ask you about. So, what's your current read on Giorgia Meloni? Because you seem to have high hopes of her.
That's
coming
a
into
really tough question, because I'm getting like a lot of very contradictory stuff coming from Italian sources over there, and I don't know if she's not another Trojan horse, or if she's somebody who's just kind of trapped in a bad situation while they put pressure on her. I think that she could be running a war of attrition against the EU in terms of time. Like, let's tell them what they want. Let's play these games for as long as we want until other things break, and then they take the pressure off of us.
Yeah,
and that's my most generous read of what's going on. Yeah. But the coalition is in serious trouble because Berlusconi and Salvini are not happy with her, as she effectively plays footsie with the EU on things like immigration and budget policy and everything else. And again, she may not be in any position to do anything else other than that. And of course, histrionic Italians, I'm sorry, I repeat myself, jump at that the same way that we have black-pilled Americans now so worried about things that every time the Fed does anything that is other than raise interest rates by 75 basis points, that's considered a pivot. But that's their psychological problem, not the act, but again, Italian politics, like they wrote the book on freaking the deep state and, backstabbing. So, all I can tell you is I don't see anybody standing up with a big macho, moment going, look,
But
Yeah, we're doing this, but I think I just think there's a lot of captured pawns in Italy. I also think a lot of the political class in Rome is still fully in the tank for the Davos agenda. And until there's critical mass for that to shift, and there isn't critical mass within the Rome mafiosi for that to shift. It's at it's at the popular level, but it's not at the political level yet.
Yep.
Say similar to what we have here. We don't have critical mass here at the political level.
But
right?
I think there are some spots in Europe though that are seeming they're close to approaching that critical mass where popular opinion will overrule up the leaders in power.
I think Mark Rutte in the Netherlands is in serious trouble.
Yeah,
I mean seriously. Like
we'll find out
roll
soon.
out the friggin' tanks against the farmers 5 days before a general election. What are you out of your mind?
Yeah. I just saw that it looks like their protests are just started to spark back up again.
Yeah. So, but again, it's like, they executed a decapitation of the UK. There is a lot of chatter from the people who are reading the UK carefully that Charles is going to dissolve the government in May at his coronation. Now, again, you salt all this to taste.
Yeah,
but
yeah. But then again,
I'm throwing this out there as something.
I was waiting for you to use that phrase.
Yeah, well, yeah. Okay. Wait till I use suck Satan's cock, and then we're really down.
I'm just waiting for a situation in real life where I can use that phrase.
Oh, I use it all the time. I use it all the time. But yes, look, dudes. Like, if you haven't watched the Bill Hicks, the Bill Hicks routine on selling out in Hollywood, because that's where that comes from. That's Bill Hicks.
Okay.
Go watch the Bill Hicks. Just the Bill Hicks, not Arsenio Hall. MC Hammer.
Okay.
That's all you got to do. Bill Hicks, MC Hammer. Well, Hammer, back again, huh?
All right.
Awesome. Oh, it's phenomenal. It's just phenomenal. So, yeah, I absolutely recommend everybody do that. So I like sold all the stuff to taste about what's going on with the British Crown and all of this stuff, because it's very possible that, like, look, everything's happening between now and the end of June, right? Yellen has already said we are going to have a debt ceiling fight. She started prepping for this in November. For
crazy, I know.
Okay.
I remember seeing it. Like, we don't.
Oh yeah, we're going there. Well, it's a note. Is it any different than Pelosi in June of 2020 or July of 2021 talking about the debt ceiling vote over and tying it to Build Back Better for 4.5 months? It ain't different. It's not. They always do this. This is, and I described it at the time as the scene from Blazing Saddles where Cleavon Little's got the gun to his head. Everybody take a step back, or he gets it, because I'm not allowed to use that word, right? So, and this was Pelosi saying, "Don't make me shoot myself in the head." Like, dude, you have the power in Congress to pass Build Back Better tomorrow, or do you? Or the infrastructure bill tomorrow, or do you? You don't, because she never really had a majority in the Senate, because Manchin and Sinema were never going to go along with this. Why? Because Wall Street told them not to go along with it. That's why. Because it's the only way that they stand up for 4.5 months worth of pressure. But they tried to tie it to the debt ceiling to shame the Republicans across the line and get a few of them to break and pass it for them over them. And that's what happened. That's what Pelosi was trying for. She couldn't get it done. She couldn't get it done because the whisper campaign had already started. This shit is over. We are done with this. The counter-revolution started the day after Powell was appointed and John Williams was appointed to the New York Fed. Okay. And then the 5-year rollout of SOFR began. Multiple times the Americans tried to pull out of the global dollar markets, pull their assets out of global dollar markets and the banks by not repoing European sovereign debt during the 2019 collateral shortage and then during 2020. And that's why we had to get 6 months later, we had to get another round of this shit with COVID. Like, COVID is nothing more than a force the Fed to pivot and to advance the rest of the political agenda at the same time. It was like a geopolitical 3 for 4 for Davos. But the big one was to force the Fed to stay at the zero bound, monetize a whole bunch of debt, and destroy the dollar and then to flood the world with insane amounts of dollar liquidity to pay for climate change and to roll out MMT and to get rid of Jerome Powell and have him blame him for everything that fall and move Lael Brainerd in as the head of the FOMC to, send the United States down the full MMT retard path.
Yeah.
And that way you freeze capital in Europe. You prop up the euro, you prop up European sovereign debt, you keep it at the zero bound. The ECB never has to get off the zero bound. And then they can continue their war funding and all the rest of it. And this is how it was supposed to go. And Powell held out. Manchin and Sinema held out. The inflation's got out. The story around, while we need all this money in order to build the economy back better because we're still struggling with COVID, was a fucking lie.
Mm-hmm.
The CBO report, that's why when Manchin came out and said, I'm going to wait for the CBO report before I vote on this. And when the CBO report came out and said, this is not going to be revenue neutral, even though Biden went out every day and read off the teleprompter, badly, I might add.
Yep. I watched that thing.
This thing is all paid for and it's all revenue neutral and they are all on the same talking point. When the CBO report comes out and says, this thing's going to cost $6.5 trillion and most of that $6.5 trillion will hit in the first 3 years of the bill. At that point, the argument was done. It was over.
Mm.
And then notice how during that same time, there was an insider trading scandal against every hawk on the Federal Reserve, including the Fed chair, which was orchestrated by Lael Brainerd because she's the one who signed off on all the fucking trades.
Mm.
Because she was the compliance officer for all of the Fed governors' portfolios. So she signed off on every one of those trades. And then she leaked that information to Axios or whoever, Politico, and then ran with it because she wanted to be Fed chair. And Powell just stuck to his guns. And they got Kaplan, Carita, and Rosengren, and they replaced them. They replaced them with a couple of commies, but non-voting commies. Oh, by the way, this year and next year. Powell's still in charge. John Williams is still in charge. They tried to go after John Williams too. It failed. Because they were staring at SOFR becoming the law of the land. They were going to reverse SOFR. They were going to reverse it all. Okay? They were going to extend the LIBOR into 2026.
Do you know what the incentives?
That's what they were going to do. These fucking people. Screw these people. They're fucking horrible. And I'm going to tell you this right now. Zero Hedge is completely wrong about all of this.
Okay, yeah.
They are running the doom porn cycle up and I'm at war with Zero Hedge on this. It's really obvious. I'm at war with certain camp within Zero Hedge that does not believe this. They took a thinly veiled pot shot at me this morning. That's fine. I don't care. I've taken not so thinly veiled pot shots at them. So
must be doing something right if you're getting.
What's that? Oh yeah, I don't care at this point. I love Zero Hedge. I think they're great.
Zero Hedge is one of the better ones.
No, I mean, Zero Hedge is great. I owe what success I have to them and to them reprinting my work and everything else. But dudes, at the end of the day, you're going to be wrong about this.
Mm-hmm.
You're wrong. Go read their arguments today read some of the stuff they wrote today, and they came to the exact wrong conclusion about what the deal was about. This was a quid pro quo between two warring institutions within the United States government, and Powell is not going to be forced to pivot here. He may not raise rates. They may have done enough damage to get that done. And again, ask yourself the question: whose ox is gored with a U.S. Treasury above 4% on the 10-year? And moreover, all of this is happening while the changeover at the BOJ is happening at the Bank of Japan. Kuroda stepped down last week. The new guy, Ueda, came in and said, yeah, we're not going to change anything. And I got news for you. Ueda is like Powell, is not cut from the same cloth as Kuroda.
Okay.
I haven't talked about this publicly, but I talked about it privately with you, Brett, you as a patron should already know this.
Yep. Okay.
Where I'm going with this. Already talked about this. So look, I found a great article in the Nikkei website talking about why Kuroda's vice chair, Amaniya, did not take the job. He turned it down. Explicitly turned it down for the good of Japan. Because he said, not quote, but mostly quote, that I was part of the architecture of this current monetary system. It things are changing. I might not be a good objective, steward of monetary policy since I was an architect of this current system. I am going to step aside. Now, he did this in Japan. If this was the United States, that's one thing. In Japan, for him to turn down an honor like this, which was supposed to be his turn, period. And he turned it down. In the United States, and in the West, like stabbing each other in the back is like normal. For a guy like that to turn down in an honor-based system like Japan, to turn down that honor for the good of Japan tells you everything behind the scenes that the BOJ is about to change. Period. And I am arguing that the Japanese are going to end yield curve control. And when they do, everything about everything about the structure of European capital markets through the carry trades and the ability of the offshore dollar markets through the buying and selling of U.S. treasuries is going to change. And as far as I'm concerned, I think this is already done. I think this is already a done deal. And because that's the biggest signal of all to me, that we now have the right person in charge over at the BOJ to end QE. Because remember, it's the last of the major central banks that were on the coordinated central bank policy. In late 2011, we exited the dollar reserve standard because it was broken, and we created they created the coordinated central bank reserve system, which is the BOJ, the SNB, the BOE, the ECB, and the Fed all got together, issued cross-currency swap lines, and created a big $500 billion slush fund, and then went on round-robin QE. First the Fed, then the ECB, then the BOJ, then this one, then that one, all constantly doing that and levering up their balance sheets. The SNB became the equity hedge fund of the entire world. They took care of supporting equity prices. The BOJ took care of supporting the euro through the carry trades. The Fed supported all of it at the zero bound. Right? The BOE played its game. Blah, blah, blah. Everybody took everybody had their role. Well, Brexit was in place. The BOE was the first one to get off the zero bound. They were the first ones to start raising rates.
Yeah, isn't Brexit now kind of compromised?
Brexit is done with the globalist takeover with Rishi Sunak and getting rid of Liz Truss and the end of Queen Elizabeth's reign. It was that was a coup, and it was executed the same week that that Credit Suisse was forced to be bailed out. Again, another moment where the Fed had to step in and provide temporary liquidity, and everybody's like, "See, the Fed's going to bail everybody out." No, they bailed out Credit Suisse. Why? Because Credit Suisse is part of the Fed's. The Credit Suisse is on the Fed's side, for lack of a better term. Okay, so that's why they bailed them out, and the same thing with the SNB.
Well, and if Prince Charles did dissolve the government, I mean, that would change everything.
It would if he dissolves Parliament. Yeah.
Holy crap! What a wake-up call would that be?
I think they're going to move directly to a digital pound.
I mean, Rishi Sunak's already floated it out. I mean, he gave that.
It's already out.
Well, back in December or January, he gave that rosy videos like a central bank.
They're moving very quickly towards it. I was talking with my patrons this morning, and one of them was tweeted out or told us is like, look, the entire alert system for Britain, like the digital alert system through your phones, is coming. Like emergency the emergency, like they're going to do the whole fucking thing. It's all they're going to decapitate the UK sometime this year, maybe in May around the coronation. At least let's watch for it to happen. Okay. Did we ever get Cyber Polygon? I never thought we were going to get it, and I had God knows how many people like scream at me on my blog that I was full of shit, and I'm like, I finally had to all right, you're blocked. I waste too much time with you.
If anyone wants to know about Cyber Polygon, just look at Event 201 and apply that to.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, I've said from the beginning, like if they're going to take down the global electricity network, well, then all of their power goes away because all their power is in credit, electronic dollars and claims on dollars. So don't kid yourself, folks. You think that they would take down the global electrical grid to go after Bitcoin? Are you fucked in the head?
Like they would not be able to control the amount of chaos that would ensue.
No,
Like there's just
no,
no way.
they think they can. They think chaos is an opportunity, but what they don't realize is that it is in the short run, but in the long run, it also creates, it's an opportunity for other people to see them for who they are and then make structural changes around them, while they're raising the cost of doing business in their old system to the point where it overwhelms the cost benefit analysis of staying in their old system, which is what I wrote about last week.
Yes, well, I think if they want to cause chaos, they'll do it in a semi-limited fashion, which is what I thought like the summer of love was in 2020. Like,
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what the train derailments are about, and that's what
right.
It's what leaking out that how did we find out that Bill Gates is the largest owner of farmland in the United States, and he doesn't own all that much.
No, not really.
Like he owns 0.04% or 0.04% of that's how big the amount of farmland is. I mean, the United States, like we have so much farmland that's being paid by the federal government not to farm.
Mm-hmm.
That's more than the amount of farmland that Bill Gates has. But somehow magatards keep falling for this this is some kind of structural plan. No, this is a psyop to get you tilting at shadows. Not to say that Bill Gates isn't a bad guy.
Oh, I appreciate any negative press about Bill Gates, but
of course, who doesn't?
But I think people need to start looking higher up. Like he's not.
Yeah,
he's not
the fact that he can't go to India without being arrested on sight and thrown in a fucking hole for mass murder. Because Modi physically allowed those lawsuits to go forward, which is part of the reason why the BRICS is now spelled BRIICSS, where the two I's are Iran and India, and the two S's are South Africa and Saudi Arabia, which happened last week when the Iranians and the Saudis normalized relations.
So, de-dollarization, how I could see everything accelerating. I know a lot of people are like, we're not going to go with the dollar, the petrodollar anytime soon.
Yeah, we are.
But
well, it all depends on
if we go at the current rate, but things keep picking up.
The thing is, it all depends on. It's all negotiation now.
Yeah.
It's like the deal with over Silicon Valley Bank. It's a negotiation, but the negotiation's not happening in any one theater. Okay, it's happening, and there's multiple factions negotiating. There's multiple theaters in which to negotiate. Okay. Europe is not going to give up on sending the United States and getting it involved in a two-front war against two nuclear powered rivals that it can't win a war against. Okay. That it can't afford to fight. Doesn't have the manpower to fight. Doesn't have the infrastructure to fight. Has the technology to fight it. Can inflict horrific losses on the Russians and the Chinese. No doubt about that.
Yeah.
But realistically speaking,
So,
but being said, de-dollarization and the rate at which the rest of the world will de-dollarize, the global South will de-dollarize, or the BRICS will de-dollarize, is all dependent upon whether or not the Fed wins its war against Davos. Because the Fed is already okay with pulling back. What the Fed is doing is pulling back on global dollars to allow for the smooth transition to a multipolar financial world. What Davos is fighting tooth and claw is to reimpose that entire system.
What is the Fed's motivation? What's driving them to make these changes? They just don't want nuclear war, and they don't want survival.
It's just pure survival, dude. That's all
survival.
It is. Pure survival.
I mean, it makes sense.
Central bank digital currency would mean the end of commercial banking.
Yes.
So
it would be the end of the Federal Reserve. I mean,
eventually,
current form. I mean, the Fed is not, remember, this is a much different discussion, right? When you get into that level, like the Fed was put in place to backstop the commercial banks, but then it was destroyed in structure by FDR, who was a fucking commie, to build the system that we have today, to build the Eurodollar system post-World War II. That Eurodollar system was just ended by Jerome Powell in 13 months. Okay? With a 5-year rollout. This is where we are. Now, we have to deal with the fallout of this. We have to deal with the reorganization of capital. We got to deal with the tearing down of old political systems and rebuilding of new ones. We have to deal with the fact that these systems are not, that the systems we currently have are inadequate to contain the chaos. And yes, there's going to be people destroyed. There's going to be minor contagion effects and all the rest of it. SIVB was twice as big as fucking Lehman Brothers, and they basically curtailed the whole goddamn thing in 24 hours.
Oh.
To tell you that it wasn't a systemically problematic thing, because the markets have already been systemically ring fenced in many ways. There's going to be aftershocks. There's going to be companies that can't make payroll. There's going to be stuff that happens. There's going to be, there's going to be good people who get fucked here, but there's going to be there's going to be an order of magnitude more bad people fucked, or at least relative to their power base. And what you'll see is a whole lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth from I hate the Fed crowd, who just want to be fucking right and not actually actively engaged when this was a necessary step in the path back towards at least regional community banking.
Yes,
Right.
I've heard you say
because SOFR will create that naturally and organically. Okay.
Yeah, I've heard you say a couple times now that, like, as libertarians, we need to move on from Ron Paul, because, like, and the Fed kind of had this moment. It woke up a lot of people, but we need to continue to learn further and realize we can't just end the Fed like tomorrow. Like,
look, I love Ron Paul to death. I met him over the summer at and I sat next to him and had breakfast with Lou Rockwell, like, at this, when I gave the speech over at the RPI thing on foreign policy. I met all, I owe them all a debt of gratitude. Like, they're all my fucking intellectual heroes, and they're people who I just absolutely adore. But at the same time, a lot of the discussion, certainly about Ron as a politician, he's not stupid. He's an incredibly smart guy and incredibly sharp, even into his late 80s. Right. That he's still trying to wake the same group of the next tranche of people who aren't awake yet up. That's his part of the market.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I operate in the space that I'm awake, have done the 20 years of backwards story, and to get down and dirty and to try and figure out who these people are.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I'm doing. And I'm trying to help the people caught in the middle, who are mostly awake, but still need to go to work every day and get shit done.
Yeah.
Right. We need, I got almost 2,700 patrons. I need to send them out into the world every day, armed with good information, so that they can just not be so goddamn worried about the future, so that they can go to work and be focused on doing their job and raising their families and storing up their communities and doing all the work that needs to be done.
Yeah. See, this is where I see, I see value of me, like, participating in the Libertarian Party of Minnesota, because there's a network effect here. Got plugged into with, I'm connected with a bunch of people who are prepared to hear this type of message if you want to go one step further. And so I don't necessarily see it as a tool for actually obtaining levers of power, but messaging.
Brett, that's exactly the way you should look at the LP. Okay.
Right.
I used to do it here in Florida. I was nearly state chair, by the way. I was one vote away from state chair.
Wow.
Okay. Fourth largest state party in Florida. Had I actually put together an actual campaign, I would have beat the GOP Rhino, who would have been running the party.
What year was this?
This is 2004.
Okay.
So the year of the platform being undermined by the Rhinos, the year that Justin Raimondo walked away from the Libertarian Party. Okay. The only good thing that came out of that was that Badnarik was the candidate, and he was at least a hardcore libertarian. But he was also not acceptable as a national candidate, because, hell, the guy didn't even have a fucking driver's license. But no way imaginable had I been state chair of Florida at that 2004 convention, I would have taken every one of those sons of bitches out on the fucking convention room floor, beaten them to within a fucking inch of their life, and would have taken the entire floor. I would have walked the entire Florida caucus off the goddamn floor. And Wayne Allen Root would never have been a part of the party. Bob Barr would have never run in 2008, blah, blah, blah. The party was destroyed in 2004, and I walked away from it.
Yeah.
So that being said, at the state party level, and my mentors in the LPF, the Libertarian Party of Florida, always kept saying the same thing. Tom, this is an educational organization. We don't have the money, the manpower, the capital, or anything else. Our goal is to use that capital as wisely as possible to wake as many people up. That's what it's for. The system is rigged against us. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. And I listened to them. I walked away and I gave all my money to the Mises Institute.
Last
The money
summer,
I used to give them, I gave them to them.
last
Well
summer,
spent.
I sat at a table at a city festival, whatever, for one afternoon, and I actually handed out 19 copies of economics in one lesson.
There you go.
I mean,
It's a good start.
inflation was a hot topic. It's easy to sell people on economic during that point.
I have stood on street corners. I have raised signatures. I have run
Yeah.
for public office. I've done it all.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
and I recommend anybody who can run a zero cost campaign for state house. If you can get the signatures and get on the ballot, you should do it because you'll get. How much free media you get for being on the ballot.
Yeah.
And it's not, and then
simply just
and then
organize
today, in the era of podcasting and the era of community of communications, you can do all sorts of great work as being the guy who's running for, as the libertarian in our district. Isn't that funny? And just, get somebody on your staff who has publicist chops, and you'll get interviews, and you'll do work, and you'll build it's a different world than when I did it. And when I did it, we spent 90% of our money just getting on the fucking ballot. Because none of us had 2 nickels to run together to pay the signing cost. The
ballot access is a sort of subject for the Libertarian Party, Minnesota. Which
it should be because
it's
completely disgusting. Our ballot access system was designed by the Brits to keep to keep the interlopers out and keep them in.
So I feel like we're at least trying to do something here in Minnesota, because I don't know if you've been following what's happening here in our state, because we kind of get overshadowed by all the other leftist states on either coast.
Right.
But they've banned the sale of internal combustion engine vehicles by 2035 or 2040.
That's absolutely the Davos time.
Yeah,
it's the same thing with the EU.
They're closing the 2 remaining coal plants within the next 10 years, and they're replacing with solar fields. Like the original plan to replace the coal plant in my hometown.
Don't worry about that. Do you know what Silicon Valley Bank? Do you understand that the whole solar industry in the United States is going to collapse?
Yeah. I just saw the
funded through SVB
TV tweet that you retweeted, and I'm like, okay, you know what? This could be reversed in the next election cycle.
Oh yeah, this is all this stuff can easily be reversed.
And a lot of this stuff
has already reversed himself on no new oil when he's going to allow
Alaska.
the country to go to Alaska. So this is all done. That tells you more than anything else that some Obama official is going to have to be head chopped and removed.
And there's already been a couple.
Lost control of DC completely, and you watch for this. We're going to see something like Susan Rice or Valerie Jarrett, not maybe them, but somebody near and dear to them.
Because they're going to need to spend at least
Samantha
somewhat of
Power will have to forcibly step down from the head of USAID, something like that. Sorry, go ahead.
People are going to have to be put on the chopping block just to build some credibility and trust back in the new regime that's going to follow.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It has to start now.
So and they're also going to have to build back trust in the media. So I'm interested in seeing how the media.
That is not going to happen.
Okay,
it will not happen.
And so
what will happen in the media is that the right wing dissident media will continue to rise. Rumble, BitChute.
Yep.
Companies like Newsmax and others are going to continue to get the funding. I'm not necessarily Newsmax. It's just the first one that pops into my head.
Yeah.
But I know that Chris Reddy, the CEO of Newsmax, is plugged into that whole scene.
Yeah.
So having worked with them on and off for 10 years, I know, I just know this stuff. Right. And again, I'm an independent contractor with Newsmax. I don't hang out with them, but I've been down there enough times. I know what's, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. And this is the Dave Rubin, Peter McCormick, all that stuff. It's all there and it's all coming. And they're just going to build alternative media coming out of there. And, that's what the whole Rumble thing is about. That's what, so don't sweat any locals, all that shit. That's where this is coming from. And, media is going to break as a monolithic thing. And YouTube is trying to hold on to whatever they can, while getting rid of the stuff that doesn't make any money. Google is in serious, serious trouble here. Silicon Valley Bank was a major source of, Google, shenanigans. This is all going to go away. Every bit of it. The more I dig in, the more I hear stuff, the more people send me shit about what was going on there. I'm like, oh, this is clearly what was going on. So don't sweat it. Okay.
Right. And so the last thing I want to hit about on is I guess would say if Davos is losing, there seems to be their last card to play is World War III.
Yeah, it is.
Is
And
the last card they have
that's
left.
what they're trying for. And it's very clear. And the Russians understand that you just keep taking the punch in the mouth. And the Iranians keep saying, oh, okay, we'll take another punch in the mouth.
Man,
And the Chinese will, smoosh things over with the Saudis and the Turks. And, the area to watch right now is Armenia, Georgia, and the Nagorno-Karabakh and the Azeris, because we're trying to push the Azeris into, a new, and Pashinyan, who's the Soros-guided fucking prime minister in Armenia, who I can't believe he's still in freaking power. But, somehow by hook or crook, that guy was able to hold on to power like that. And that tells you, like, they're just that they're trying to open the Caucasus up, and the Russians are trying to pull the Caucasus back. Because look, this is because once Georgia opens up, then the entirety of the Black Sea becomes a Russian lake. Once Erdogan's called for elections in May, early, because then that'll be fine. He'll win that most likely. We're going to look, with all of these things blowing up, a lot of that money that would normally flow in to projects like this is now going away. See, this is the way you've got to look at this stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting.
This is why you have to combine macroeconomic analysis with geopolitics. You can't separate the two.
You can't separate them. They
Right,
are.
And you're one of the very few guys that are doing this right now, which is why I wanted to have you on.
And I'm hoping to train a whole new generation of you because.
Oh, trust me, I'm just learning right. I mean, I've been following you ever since beginning of last summer, and all that stuff is still way over my head. But I'm like trying
That's
to.
Okay, like do you know that in 2005 when I was reading Jim Sinclair and he was talking about non-recourse loans and the gold financing, I had no idea what the fuck he was talking about. I would read Zero Hedge and I would read all this. I had no idea. I would read articles at Zero Hedge that literally were like reading Swahili. And today I crack over and I'm like, oh yeah, obviously. So it's like everything else. It just takes time and repetition and the ability and the desire to figure this stuff out and to play the stuff out in your head. And you guys keep doing it and you'll get better at it. So
and be flexible, not afraid to be wrong.
Yeah, you have to get out there and throw shit at the wall and then have somebody who knows more than you go, no, sorry, you're wrong about that. And here's where you're right. And here's where you're wrong. And go, oh, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So Peter Zehan, I've been listening.
Oh God!
No, you just want me to hear. You just want to hear me say Satan's cock. I know this is what this is about.
No, and so I was just wondering because he has some of his takes line up a little bit with what you're saying, and so I was just wondering, like, what is your take on like? Have you heard his recent stuff? I imagine that he's just recently put out about.
No, I don't follow him on a regular basis, but I do know that last year he was saying that 5 million barrels of Russian oil per day were going to come off the market, and then I saw this thing the other day, like the Russians are backed up to 11.2 million barrels a day production, and I'm like, what? So are they just fucking lying about that, Pete? Yeah, any comment on that? I actually added him and told him to go fuck himself in real time because I'm done. Fuck this guy. You Stratfor CIA little amplified troll. Like fuck off.
That's fair. So more specifically about China, because he gave like a 10-year economic decline on China.
Yeah, because Stratfor and the CIA are so up their own ass on demographic analysis that they can't understand that the world is globalized and that if the Chinese are going to get old before they get rich, I got news for you. They said the same thing about Japan. You know what Japan did when the yen was at 75 to the dollar? They colonized Vietnam. Hundreds of billions of dollars flowed into Vietnam and the Ho Chi Minh City, and so Toyo or Yokohama or whomever. We're making friggin' tires. They're opening up tire factories, and Samsung was opening up factories in Ho Chi Minh City, leveraging all those well-educated 25 to 35-year-old Vietnamese, hundreds of, tens of millions of them. And all of a sudden, you might as well just add them to Japan's labor pool because that's who they're fucking working for. The Chinese will do the same thing. And the other thing you want to think about China, and this is something my partner Dexter White says all the time, the Chinese will happily, if they need to, get into a war with us and sacrifice 100 million young Chinese men. They don't give a fuck. So if you think China's dangerous at 1.4 billion people, just imagine a lean, mean 800 million person China, where the quote unquote drag on their economy from a demographic perspective is far lower. Like, this is all very standard playbook, mid-wit, first order analysis, and it has nothing to do with reality. The Arab world is
Okay.
young. The Chinese, the African world is young. They're putting tens and hundreds of billions of dollars into these countries, and they've opened up the transport corridors to get the trade done, and they've opened up and they've built the financial architecture to extricate from the old system. And while we get older, the United States has got an interesting future ahead of it. I'm not a full U.S. bear like a lot of people are. I think the U.S. is going to go into slow decline. Okay. And we're going to be having this same conversation when I'm 75 and y'all are in your 50s, and we're still having the same conversation about the United States. And yeah, our power in the world will be lower. Are we still going to be talking about lower? We're going to be talking about, what are we going to be talking about? Is the dollar going to be doomed? Well, clearly it hasn't been doomed yet, but we've been having this conversation for 2 goddamn generations now. When's the dollar going to be doomed?
Right.
At what point do you just give the fuck up, Peter Schiff, and just be wrong?
I was gonna say he was.
I was gonna bring him up too.
I was not gonna.
Yeah, I know you guys just want to push all my freaking buttons. I have them already installed, and
when you're talking about,
because I know where they are. Like,
sipping for silver and gold and all that stuff too.
I love silver.
It's good stuff,
love silver, but I love gold.
Right.
I like silver as an industrial metal.
But Schiff's a gold bug through and through, and he's also a gold salesman. So
he's a salesman.
Conflict,
and so there's that. And
I always tell people you can learn a lot from him, but learn what you can and then move on.
And then quickly move on. Like there's like first grade, Peter Schiff.
Yeah.
Buy some gold.
Well, like
get it in your wallet. Get it in there. Get it sucked away. Build your personal savings. Build real personal savings in your own central bank reserves. Yes. After that, you really think the guy's a good macro analyst?
No.
I mean, I met him at 2013 and 2014 at the New Orleans Investor Conference. I was listening to him hold court unofficially. He was doing a table discussion, standing right over him, listening to him literally give the same speeches, same talking points he was giving in 2005. I looked at my friend, I looked at the guy I had just met. We wound up becoming fast friends, and we talked. And in 10 minutes of talking to each other, we both knew that we knew more than Peter Schiff did about all of this stuff. And we went and got lunch, and then spent the rest of the conference together. And I haven't given Peter Schiff,
but he was right
since then, other than to make fun of him for being a gold only bug and for hating and shitting on Bitcoin. That's it. Otherwise, I literally don't give the man a second thought.
Yeah. Okay. I was just gonna say one thing. Like, I've always talked about like how, because I'm in the Libertarian Party, and a lot of people look at the Libertarian Party and think it's just like one thing. But it's like, because I'm in it, I see all these different factions fighting against each other over power and whatnot.
You guys over semicolons. Just wait till you start arguing over semicolons.
Trust me, I want a platform bylaws committee for our convention this year, and I'm trying to get I'm trying to get a defend the guard plank, just a simple like 2-sentence plank put into our platform. And oh my god,
like discussion once at an LPF party meeting over a fucking comma.
It happened.
I'm dead serious over a fucking comma.
Libertarian autism is real.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. Shut up, Spurg boy. It doesn't matter.
Well, I hate it when someone's super autistic, but then doesn't study stuff like this. I'm like, you have this superpower. Use it.
Right. I know. And you're worried about commas.
I wish I was more autistic almost, but
so do I. Sometimes so do I. People, I'm not. Look,
they're brilliant.
Again, I have all that. Like I do, and I've just been really practiced in overcoming it.
And I think
what you have to do is you have to be open to allowing this side of your brain, your right side of your brain, to tell you shit, and you listen to it. The problem with autistics is they are left brain dominant, and they are logic dominant, and they are threat dominated, and you have to get some.
Yeah, that's true.
You have to get some integration of those two things. And so I absolutely recommend to every libertarian autiste or every Spurg boy out there, it's time to sit down and learn how to play a musical instrument, or write some fucking poetry, or do some or
just playing piano before,
or do some pottery, or do some goddamn thing to express and it's going to suck. And it's going to suck a lot for a long time, but do it. And then, and because you have to build that stuff up. Like I was an artist first and everything else second. I was a musician and a writer when I was in my teens. When I was in college, I have a degree in chemistry and a minor in English, mostly creative writing workshops. And then just a bare. So I was like 3 classes away from my English degree. So of a dual major. And it wasn't intended. It was that I took all my electives in the English department. And I looked at the I'm like, shit, I could finish my English degree. Never did. But, because God knows I wanted to sit through 3 more woke classes on British literature because I couldn't take any more electives, right? I had to take like core courses at that point to finish, but I could have done it. So I couldn't take any more creative writing workshops and pissed everybody off by, being better than them and not being woke, which was hilarious.
Fascinating, because
imagine being in the poetry department at the University of Florida and not being woke.
All right, yeah,
and not being a commie. Oh my God, it was fun. Yeah, for very small values of fun, but I did it anyway.
The thing I was getting at too, though, is like, but you take all that competing in the party and you just think of like all the elites, and it's like, the exact same thing is happening up there. They're fighting each other.
Oh,
like,
so, yeah.
Well, they're fighting because they actually have capital to fight over. The libertarians are fighting over the only capital they have, which is intellectual capital.
Yeah. Well, the way I look at it is like the elites aren't like one big whole monolith. It's it's a giant global scale Venn diagram of overlapping interests, and for decades those overlapping interests were pretty close together, but we're in an era now where those circles are diverging.
Well, I actually like to think of it, Brett. You're right. That's a great metaphor, and I've used it many times. And thank you for like talking about it.
I mean, that's the way it makes sense to me in my head. I mean, if you have a better way to explain
it absolutely does. But here's the thing: it's actually that they're all on vectors.
Okay.
And they and ships that pass in the night. So when you think about it, so here's the neocons, they have their vector, destroy Russia. Here's Davos, they have their vector, we want to take over the world. And right now they cross.
Mm-hmm.
And the U.S. banking sector is going, hey, for years, like, hey, yeah, let's put pressure on Russia. Let's do this. Let's do all these things that make us money. And and then the factions on Wall Street and DC and then Saudi Arabia and everything, and it's all, but they're all on their own vector. Mm-hmm. And then eventually the cross happens, and then you're here.
Mm-hmm.
Oops. And when the vector cross product is equal to 0, we got a winner. When the vector cross product is not equal to 0, we have Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. That's a deep cut on my intellectual novel. Go look up Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. If you have any vector math in your head, which is basically a vector cross product when it equals 0, it means the two vectors are moving independently of each other, because you can solve for x or y independently, right? Or in the case of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, position and momentum, which is basically position and velocity. If they equal 0, then you can find the position in the x coordinate or the y coordinate. But when they're dependent upon each other, then you can't. And the vector cross product will not be equal to 0, because there will be a functional dependency of x versus y that's left over. Could be a constant. Well, as long as it's really a constant, then, but if there's any kind of x or y term in the vector cross product, then it's not. Then you're talking about, second order and tertiary, second order, you're talking about polynomial vector analysis at this point, right? So behavior. So in Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, when you solve the Schrodinger equation for the Hamiltonian operator, gobbledygook, what you wind up with is for a 2-electron system for helium, you find out that the forces acting on each of the electrons doesn't bear on each other. So the electrons affect each other. So the vector cross product of their individual momentums and positions is equal to minus IH bar, which is the square root of -1 times Boltzmann's constant divided by 2 pi minus IH bar. It's not 0 is what's important. It means that there's interaction between them. So if you fix one electron in space, you pew the other electron you don't know a goddamn thing about. You don't know anything about them. So this is why Heisenberg's uncertainty principle says the philosophical idea is then the act of observing the system, fixing one aspect of a thing in space and time makes the other stuff unknowable. You as the observer affect the system. And that's what we do when someone tries to surveil us or someone tries to put us in a box. We alter our behavior. Now, sometimes we alter our behavior in very predictable ways because of the law of diminishing marginal utility, because human behavior. Sure. But at the same time, the more pressure you put people under, the more aberrant their behavior. The more aberrant, and I mean that in a statistical sense, they get away from one standard deviation from the norm behavior. They start taking 2 sigma, 3 sigma, 4 sigma, 6 sigma risks with their money, with their time, with their family, with this, with their capital. That's what they do, and that's why Davos will lose.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to hurt. What's the global population right now? That's
7.5 billion people, and they're trying to stop the next billion from hitting the planet.
Like that's that many cats they're trying to herd. Like it's
it's worse than that. They want to get us back down to 500 billion to 500 million to a billion people, because they're insane.
Yeah, right. And so like I don't think
the system, because that's the size of the system that their system that they want to have.
Right.
Manage. They already believe that that's the biggest system they can manage, which is why Thanos rhymes with Davos from the Marvel movies.
Yeah, if you want to go in an analysis.
I've already given you all these rants. Go read the blog.
I say
this is like, just a summary of like the last 6 months worth of blog posts.
It's Hollywood's another fucking rabbit hole.
Yeah, I unfortunately, Brett, if you want me to fulfill my obligations to write a newsletter this month, I have to get going.
All right.
So this morning I was supposed to write the newsletter start writing the newsletter before I got started, and then the world blew up. So then I had to do 3 hours worth of prep.
So
now I have to literally start like taping out that article, and as a subscriber that lead article is anywhere from 2,600 to 3,000 words.
Yeah, very good stuff too. I highly recommend anybody listening to subscribe to his Patreon and to get the content that he gives. So
I'll give a quick farewell and let you know that we're going to put in links in the chat and stuff. And I'm very excited to have you on. I think Brett told me about you like 2 weeks ago, so this is all very new to me.
Yeah, and that's cool, and I'm glad we had a good time. I'm glad we had a good talk. And the other thing is that guys, don't be afraid to push back. I'm more than willing I'm always willing to explore it, even if I don't agree with you. Like I'm capable, like all good. I remember I'm a trained scientist, right? I didn't just get a degree in chemistry. I operated as a chemist for 20 years.
Wait, I have one question.
Scientist,
I want to know, do you believe in science, or do you believe or do you actually employ the scientific method?
Oh yeah, no.
I'm sorry.
Do I trust all science, or do I I don't
mean to insult you.
No, dude, you're like, this is funny. No, it's all good. I live by one adage. And that is that every good, honest, intellectually rigorous scientist lives under the same adage, which is that the more you know you don't know a goddamn thing.
Right.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
So every day,
100%.
all information is fractal, and all you're doing is uncovering the next thing to go learn.
The more questions I answer myself, the more questions I end up finding. Like it,
right, and that's the way, and that's what someone who's honest and and is intellectually honest. Now, I'm not saying that I'm intellectually honest 100, 24/7, 365. Come on, dude. Like at the end of the day, I gotta work for. If I did, I would wind up becoming a character in a Borges short story, for fuck's sake. Like, oh my god, I'm chasing my fucking tail all day. I've got perfect memory, and I don't know, and I'm stuck on the garden of forking paths. But what you do, is you just remain open-minded and open-hearted. And, when someone's got an honest question, you treat them honestly. When they have a dishonest question, you give them fucking both barrels and tell them to go fuck themselves. Like, it's not that hard. And that's my, I have time for you if you treat me with respect. If you don't treat me with respect, oh, fuck a whole lot of you. Yeah. And that's that. Then I give zero fucks. You get lambasted publicly on freaking Twitter. But it never happens in one of these because, I make it very clear where my boundaries are. Usually coming into friendly territory, so it's not a big deal. But if I haven't come into very many hostile situations yet. And even when I have people on my podcast who don't share my worldview, the best thing I try to do is like, okay, this is what I'm thinking. You can disagree with me if you want. And, and then we may have an uncomfortable conversation because, you think I'm out to lunch. That's cool. I'll cut it off early and we'll go on with our lives. It's not a big deal, but it's not to say that I'm trying to make you look bad.
That's
right?
why I can't stand debates anymore. I just rather have a
debates
conversation.
are just useless.
Yeah.
It's just useless.
That's
absolutely just useless. Like I go back and listen to the podcast I did with Peter Bookbar beginning of last year about, I was trying to give him the early version of my thesis about what I think the Fed's doing with raising rates. And you can see an old school, Austro-libertarian gold guy just not get it. And when I knew I was in trouble in that podcast, when he said, I don't think the Fed gets up at all in the morning and thinks of what's going on and cares one whit what's happening in the European markets or at the ECB. I'm like, okay, I don't agree, but tell me why. And then he proceeded to tell me why. And I proceeded after 40 minutes to cut the conversation off and never speak to him again. I'm like, no offense, dude. You can believe that, but I told you what was going to happen next. It's cool. It's all good.
So
be sure to like the video, subscribe, and then we'll put links so more people can be as smart as Brett and join his Patreon.
Appreciate it.
And that should be all. You guys see you on the other side.
Thank you.